For most people, printing starts here with Johann Gutenberg. We're in his shop in Mainz, Germany. In fact, here is Johann. You're looking a little stiff today, by the way. He's working with the mold for movable type. This is what he really invented. Everything else existed before him. The concept of the press, the word printing existed, the concept of printing existed. What he created was this way of creating movable type, of making letters movable so they could be edited and changed. Therefore, the ability to make corrections. In fact, proofreaders were called correctors of the press. The thing he invented also that transcended time was ink. The ink formulation that he created lasted for several hundred years before they changed it. So he brought it all together into a system. That's what Gutenberg really invented. He was called the man of the millennium. When they tried to find the one person over the last 1,000 years who had the most profound effect on civilization, it came down to one person, the person who invented the way that we communicate. That was Johann Gutenberg, and here we are with him today. Here we are along the banks of the Nile. They are taking the pith from a plant called papyrus. They are pounding it on rocks in order to create flat sheets. These are interwoven together to create scrolls. This became the magic material that was used for writing for many, many years. Egypt had a virtual monopoly on it. In other places, they used the hides of animals. Ultimately, it became paper. But papyrus was the first material that made writing possible and allowed information to be recorded and saved for many centuries. We're here in Fabriano, in Italy, where one of the most important products that involved printing came into being, paper. Paper was not invented here. Paper was invented in the Orient, in China and Korea. It found its way to the Middle East, where this great state secret was revealed to the Arabs, who then revealed it to the traders in the Mediterranean. It reaches Italy, and the first company, the first organization to make paper is here in Fabriano. This big vat has this liquid in it, by the way, with linen of all kinds that has been broken down. It is poured into a screen to form these sheets of paper. You can see it drying above me. By the way, the smell in here is not very good at all, as all this stuff is cooking. But it was this ingredient, it was this paper, that made printing possible. Well, here we are in ancient Rome, where they're creating the Trajan Column. You can see the chiselers above me, by the way. Someone would come and paint the letters. And as they did, they ended the letter with a small flourish, which today we call the serif. The chiselers would come in, and they would then chisel that into the stone itself. Now, by the way, you see the typo up there? Well, there isn't one. But if they had one, it was a very serious error because you didn't get a second chance to go back and redo that. In any case, the Trajan Column, Roman lettering, created the principle of the serif. This was continued by Nicholas Jensen, who then made it into type that we could print. We're here with Charlemagne and AlQyn. AlQyn of York was from that new country called Britain, by the way. And AlQyn had been hired by Charlemagne. Now, AlQyn is the one with the paper right over here, and Charlemagne is looking over his shoulder. Charlemagne, of course, you remember from the history books as the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Well, he decided that education was very important and that everyone within the realm of the Holy Roman Empire would write the same way, and they would bring education to a very high level. So he asked AlQyn to not only develop all this education, but also to come up with a standard way of writing. This way of writing became known as the uncial. Today, you know it as the lowercase. It was that alphabet that established the base for the writing systems in Europe after the Holy Roman Empire broke up, as each country went its own way with its own different handwriting style. But the one thing we had now was a lowercase and eventually capital letters, and that gave us the beginnings of the alphabet as we know it. Nicholas Jensen was the master of the mint in Paris. He had heard something about what was happening in Mainz with printing. The French king sent him there to learn. He learned printing, we think, from Gutenberg himself. He went back to France. At that point, the king had died. The Dauphin said, I'm not interested in all this stuff. So he left and went to Venice, where Jensen created one of the first printing companies in Italy. Now, he created the first typefaces that used the Italian hand, that created the delicate serif that became the mainstay of every Roman or serif typeface that would ever exist. The Jensenian Roman was virtually perfect, and every serif typeface, you would know it as Times Roman or Garamond as an example. They were all based on the Jensenian Roman, and that became the very basis for the way we communicate today and probably well into the future. If you were to ask who invented the Renaissance, no one would ever mention a name. But I contend the person who invented the Renaissance was Aldous Manutius. That's the person you see standing over there. He went and found the most original versions of the Greek historians, the Greek mathematicians, the Greek philosophers, and even some of the Roman materials as well. He set those materials in meticulous Greek or Latin. He edited them in a perfect way. He produced very small books that could fit in a saddlebag. He priced them very low. As a result, for the first time, there was this material available for study, for learning, for education. As a result, more universities started. As a result, more people got educated, and they educated other people. And people then started to write more books and transfer information from one to the other. Aldous Manutius began the revolution of print. He began the ability to take information and disseminate it to a very large population. He was the consummate editor. The person sitting there, by the way, is Erasmus, the great philosopher, who worked for Aldous as a proofreader. Here we are with Forgeronnet. Forgeronnet invents the first machine for manufacturing paper. Once again, I'm in front of a vat. I don't know what this is, by the way. I think they all want to dunk me in it. But in any case, it was this machine that made the mass production of paper possible. So what began as a secret in the Orient finds its way to Italy with the first handmade papers, now becomes an industry. Paper making becomes the most important part of the printing industry. I'm hiding here behind the second band machine of Ottmar Mergenthaler. Mergenthaler created the most important machine in the history of the printing industry. It was the machine that automated the typesetting process. Publishers had offered rewards for thousands and millions of dollars trying to find a way to automate this process because there were so many people involved in selecting type one character at a time. Mergenthaler went through 2 attempts. This is the second one. The third attempt worked. The blower model machine, which was installed in the New York Tribune in 1886, automated the production of an entire newspaper. Ottmar Mergenthaler, a German immigrant who became an American citizen, did not live to see the success of this device, but he did lay the groundwork for the automation of typesetting and the automation of the printing process that would exist for a long, long time. We're here with Tolbert Lanston. He worked for the United States government. In fact, he worked in a department right next door to Herman Hollerith, who invented the punch card and the basis for data processing. Lanston had this idea of separating the functions of input and output. He created one machine which recorded the information on a roll of tape. In fact, here it is right here. He is looking at that roll of tape, not like he's going to see very much, by the way. That then was used to drive a casting machine that cast each of the letters from a mold. You then had to assemble them into lines and into pages. But the important thing was that he had to build a mathematical model of the typesetting process so that he could have the input in one place and the output in another. His concept was that editors and writers and authors could do their own input at some point in time, which, by the way, is not a bad idea and something that's commonly done with word processing. But that mathematical model set the stage for the eventual computerization of typesetting, and then desktop publishing, page makeup, and all the aspects of using computers to put pages together and create prepress files. Here we are with Frederick Ives. Ives created the halftone process, the method that we use to reproduce photographs. This was a very important development because before this, you had to draw every drawing. You had to actually engrave it in wood or in metal. Ives found a way to take photographs that had been developed with that new process called photography with cameras that produce continuous tone prints. He found a way to shoot them through a graphic arts camera and divide them up into dots of various sizes. This gave the human eye the illusion of gray. Finally, we could print photographs with our text. We're here in Bavaria with Alois Senfelder, 1799. By accident, in his experiments to figure out some way of reproducing his compositions, he was writing on a stone his laundry list and discovered that when the image hardened, after he wrote on it with crayon, that he was able to put water on it and then ink, and the ink would transfer onto paper. Stone writing, lithography from the Greek, gave us the ability to reproduce images, to reproduce artwork. This then, through the 1800s, gave many families in homes lithographs, the only artwork that they had hanging in their homes. Curry and Ives are good examples, by the way. By the 1900s, the process was used for ornate stationery, labels, and other materials. But then they discovered that the image could be offset or transferred onto another material and then printed on paper. And that ushered in the printing industry as we know it today. I feel like a reporter from CNN at a trial that's being reported. But actually, this is one of the most important trials that ever took place. It is the trial of John Peter Zanger, held in Williamsburg, Virginia. Zanger printed something in his newspaper that the royal governor did not like, considered libelous. He sued Zanger. Zanger asked for a trial of his peers. Andrew Hamilton, not Alexander Hamilton, defended him. His peers then, the jury, acquitted Zanger. In doing so, they established the right of a free press. That was built into the Constitution and has been one of the very foundations of American democracy. The ability for the press to report the truth fairly and honestly to everyone. If there's a patron saint of American democracy, it's Benjamin Franklin. From very humble beginnings in Boston to his first shop in Philadelphia, which is where we are right now. And here's Ben, by the way, putting pressure against the type and the paper in order to create an impression, and his assistant putting ink on the ink balls ready for the next impression. Ben Franklin signed the 3 documents that created the United States of America: the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Treaty of Paris. From those humble beginnings, he formed his own shop. Then he went into partnership with others. He started his own publishing company and published Poor Richard's Almanac, which, by the way, was in more homes in colonial times than the Bible was. He went on to form the first postal service so that they had a form of distribution. He became so wealthy that he was able to retire in his 40s and devote his time to science and also to politics. Ben Franklin was the definitive American. Ben Franklin was the person that took printing and made it into a business, and his shops were all over the colonies at that time. Well, there you have it, our hyper-review of the history of printing. You can see that Gutenberg created a system, but he did it based on the work of many other people. And he created this communication system that would last 550 years. In fact, it will probably last another 550 years, but certainly there will be competition from the internet and electronic approaches. So from here in the old world of printing, I welcome you to the new world of printing.